Hello and welcome to the Ripples of Courage podcast. I am Rock, your host, and this is the third episode. And I'm very happy and grateful that you are here joining me in this episode. In the last episode, we talked about perfectionism. Basically, what is it about? How it affects our life, our well-being, and so for this episode, we are going to dive into what are the ways that we can manage perfectionism or what we can do to address it. And basically, have a happier, healthier life and better well being in the process. Most of the things that I'm going to share are still based from the book that I'm reading or I read, which is Overcoming Perfectionism, second edition. So this is a very nice book, and if you can find the copy, or if you're suffering from perfectionism, I do recommend it. It has a lot of tips which I hope to share in this episode. I'll try to make them simple. I mean, they're simple enough, but yeah, I'll try my best to share with you like what I got from this book. So yeah, but before we get into that, I think it would be nice, it would be good to refresh ourselves of what perfectionism really is, and without explaining the actual definition. But I guess what we you know discussed last time, like there are three main components to perfectionism, which is first setting really demanding and rigid standards on ourselves, and second is striving to achieve these very high standards despite its negative effects in our lives, and the third is basing our self-worth on achieving those very high rigid standards. So that's basically what perfectionism is. And as we've discussed in the last episode, there's a lot of ways that it can affect our lives. And so now we'd like to look into how do we address it? How do we manage it? So there's a lot of steps, that are here in this book, but I wanna sort of like group them into three main steps, no. And so the first step, which is usually the hardest, but also the most important step, is to actually decide that you want to change. Decide that you want to address your perfectionism intentionally and purposively. To acknowledge that it is there, it's affecting your life, affecting your well being, and that you want to do something about it. That's always the difficult part, but a very important part. And of course, it's not easy, diba? It's hard. It's hard. It can be hard because, remember, for people suffering from perfectionism, so you associate your self worth around those very high standards that you've set for yourself, and so in a way, it's like whatever you have, whatever positive thing that you have, is because of that. It's because of this striving to achieve these standards that you've set for yourself. And so it's scary because then you start asking yourself, or you start wondering, are you going to lose whatever you have? Are you going to lose what you built? Are you going to miss out on whatever other positive things that could happen or that could come now that you are actually lowering your standards? And essentially, it feels like you are becoming or letting yourself become a lesser version of yourself. So it's scary. Um, and I remember I even have this experience like with in one of the sessions with my therapist. I think it was more about like the self compassion conversation, and I mentioned something like, um, but yeah, I'm scared because what if I become lazy? What if suddenly I don't produce good results, or like I don't produce good outputs, and I lose like the last ounce of discipline that I have in myself, and I just, you know, whatever, like almost like it's almost like I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna lose everything because now I am lowering the standards. And I was literally, I was really scared about it. So yeah, it can be scary. And there's like a process naman talaga, di ba? Internally, psychologically, there's an internal battle usually. It's not like, oh, I'm experiencing this and like in a snap I want to change it, I'm gonna do something about it. If that happens, then good. That happens to you, good. But it usually doesn't happen like that. So there's a process that you have to go through as well to finally decide, okay, it's about time. And one of the things that the book suggests that we do is it's to identify the cost of change. So um, the process would include like identifying the pros and cons of your perfectionism. Like, remember, so there are many different ways that it manifests in our lives, diba? Some behavioral manifestations, and like just list like what are the positives you think, diba, that you are getting out of it, and like the negative, um, the cons as well. And then based on each of those things, you also identify like what's needed to address this problem, and you reflect on what are the costs of actually doing that change. Maybe sometimes it's time investment, that's a cost. Maybe it's more psychological, emotional cost. And so you'll see, and you'll also assess like how important this is really for me, meaning how important really is that criteria, or that standard, or how important is it for you that these cons, or like this um, negative impact is addressed, diba? So you did an exercise, and of course, at least to me, and I hope it will be for you if you do try it, that you'll find that it's worth it. It's worth addressing this, because you'll see. Yeah, I can understand that perfectionism really has some benefits and some perks, and I would still, I would still um, credit much of my whatever success I have. No, I would still credit much of it to some parts of my perfectionism. One of the things that my former colleagues, or like clients, really like about the work I do is that like I'm very keen to details, like it's good quality, at least that's what they say. And yeah, and now like I'm doing freelance work, and I have my business, and former clients are coming to me because they like the quality of the work that I've delivered. And so I still associate, some of the successes to some parts of perfectionism. And but at the same time, when I reflect on this is where I am now, and these are the impacts as well. And because I feel like perfectionism can really help you, but it can only take you It can only take you far enough, you know. There's gonna be a point where it will exhaust you. It will break you almost, and and yeah, at least for me, that's like, this is no longer worth it. And the cost of changing is not as much compared to the benefit that I would get if actually I would, let go of some of this perfectionist um, behaviors, stuff like that. So yeah, um, identifying the cost of change as one of the ways to help you get to the decision that you actually want to change. So that's the first part, deciding that you want to change and address your perfectionism. The second part, which is a very fun part to me, which is gathering data or data gathering. So like if you do, so there's like research, survey, and experiment that can happen, in this process. But basically, gathering data. So first, of course, the most important part, like the start, is really understanding as well your perfectionism, how it is manifesting in your life. Because it doesn't necessarily manifest like in all areas of your life. So to me, very clearly, it manifests in my professional life at work. Like I have very, very rigid standards for myself at work, how I show up at work. But it's not the same for like the social aspect of my life. Like if it's a thing with friends, like I don't have, not that I don't have a standard for myself, but I feel like I can show up and like I'm good. Like if people don't think I'm cool or whatever, like it's not that important to me. Um, I think. But at work it's different. So I know that there's a clear manifestation of perfectionism at work for me. And of course, like at home, it's not as much. Like I can live in a little bit of chaos. So yeah. So yeah, so identify it for yourself. And there's a process as well. I think I mentioned it in the last episode where I try to draw, like to map out how perfectionism is manifesting in my life. And it's also very helpful because you see in that map, which is again in the book. So I really recommend that you get the book if you are, suffering from perfectionism. Um, there's a process where you map out like why your perfectionism persists, and you'll see that it's really a vicious cycle. It's a cycle that feeds itself. Tama ba yan? Like it feeds itself. Um, like you set very high standards. That's almost like you're positioning yourself to fail, and you have very specific, rigid criteria for that. And again, it's likely that you're gonna fail, and you're gonna go into this process of self-hating, self-loathing whatsoever, and then you just go back to you know punishing yourself and like pushing yourself to adhere to these very high standards. And like in my case, or like I guess in many cases, for people who suffer from perfectionism, like if you achieve it, then you go into the cycle of, okay, that was probably not hard enough. I was just fooling myself. And so I need to go back to that loop and actually make this criteria harder. Something like that. It would look different because again, it manifests differently in different areas of our life. So it will be different. But it's very helpful to map it. And I think it gave me so much clarity as well when I did that exercise. So I'll try to share like on the page of the website of the podcast. I'll try to share some more information. So go check it out. But yeah, so first, the most important data that you get first is like understanding how perfectionism manifests in your life. And then there's, because with perfectionism, actually, there's a lot of, and I mentioned this in the last episode, there's a lot of cognitive distortion that's happening, a lot of not very logical thinking that's happening. And you tend to rationalize them. And yeah, it's almost like distorted. So the thing is, you want to challenge these thoughts, these beliefs. And there are ways that you can do that. So there's two things mentioned here. But you can do three, diba? First is like research. You do a search online. For example, you have this very rigid belief that this this kind of thing or like this activity has to be done only within this amount of time. And maybe you find like you have very strict standard on that time that you spend on something. Maybe you can do a search and see what's really the average time that it takes to do that thing. And maybe you're doing it all right. Diba? Maybe you just have a very fictional idea of how much time it requires. So you do a little bit of research. And then you can also do survey with the people that you know. What would be an example of this? But idea is to test your assumptions. So, for example, if you think like, siguro, for me, I used to think that I need to, let's say it's an email, like I need to review my emails. Although I didn't do this particular survey, but so I check my emails. I check like everything excessively with the idea that my emails have to be. You see, it's not. Why am I even thinking like that? Diba? So my emails have to be really written well, so that because if they are not, then something bad is going to happen. Like it's either like I would be miscommunicating with people, or like people would respect me less, or like I would lose a potential gig or a client because my email is not very good enough. Things like that. And so I think like you have to do it this way. And a survey could look something like, ask people, especially maybe people that you think really make nice emails, or like when you read them, like, okay, this is clear or whatever. And then just do a survey, like how much do you check your emails, things like that. And then you'll see, as you gather like their responses, you see like, okay, that's data that you can use to challenge whatever assumption that you have for yourself. So that would be for surveys. And then you can uh, um there's so many examples that you can do with surveys. And then another is, and this is fun, which is experimenting on your assumptions as well, on your behaviors. So to use the email as an example, because I mentioned diba last time, like when I write an email before, or like anything that I write, I would like review all the sentence. Write, read, write, read, write, read, write, read. And and the thinking is that, again, like something bad would happen if it's not perfect, or like something, if there's a mistake there. And so an experiment would be something like, and I kind of did this, which is, okay, from now on, I'm writing email. I'm not checking them. Just write everything. Write, 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 write. I'm allowed to check once before I send. And then that's how I do it for a change. And so I just observe. It's an experiment. I just observe if anything bad happens. And as you guessed, no, nothing bad happens. It's not like I would receive an email from a colleague saying that, oh, you missed a comma, there's a wrong period, your sentence was not, you could have written it this way. Oh, actually, you could have used this word instead of that. It doesn't happen. Never happened. So, okay, no need to check the email excessively. But that's just one experiment. Another experiment that was shared in the book was like if your perfectionism is, for example, cleanliness of your house, and you have this thinking now, if you invite people and your house is not very clean, that they will judge you, or that they will not enjoy um, whatever it is that you're doing at home in your house, or that they will not go back again, diba? And a way to experiment, for example, is you don't clean your house at all. It's very extreme. Or maybe you clean your house, but it's not, the usual standard that you do it. It's a little lower than that. You just do a little bit like, okay, you don't like you don't clean all the corners of the house. Diba? You just clean just some parts of it, and then you try it, and then you invite people intentionally to test it out, and maybe ask them, okay, are you enjoying? How's your experience? Diba? And also try to, after that event, maybe try to invite them again, because you have an assumption that they will not return, they will not go back again if your house is not clean, stuff like that. And you just run that experiment. And that's a way, that's a way to challenge our assumptions, our beliefs, diba? It's like it's almost like yung challenging your limiting beliefs, because these are very limiting beliefs, diba? Very, very limiting beliefs. So gathering data is understanding your perfectionism, and also challenging them with information outside. So, ayan. Ano ba bang example ng mga dapat i-challenge, like a fact versus fiction? There's one that I'm experimenting on. I don't know if I should share this, but yeah, whatever. And this is, the idea na to get ahead, you have to be single-minded. You have to be obsessed about one thing and give up all. And I struggled with this thought for the longest time, because I gravitate towards like doing many things, because I get bored. I get bored if I do just one thing. But I hear this a lot. I read this a lot. And I kind of forced myself into this thinking. Na if I were to do well at something, I have to do that alone. That, only that. And I need to be willing to give up everything else for this one thing that I want to be successful at. And obviously, didn't work, because so, I don't know, tired or exhausted or bored. I don't know how to describe it, but just it's just not working for me, because I'm naturally drawn to doing many things. I'm experimenting on that, so I'm still not sure if it's gonna work for me. Let's see, after a couple of years, me doing many things at the same time. Let's see where this goes. But yeah, I'm in that experiment right now, by the way. So we'll see. But it's fun, trying to get data, trying to gather data. And yeah, so the next step is, so you've decided you want to change. Now you gather data, understanding yourself, and challenging your beliefs. The third part is now the changing part. So this is where but it's still, changing mindsets. There's actually many specific steps that you can do. So I really recommend the book because you have here really good guide questions and worksheets, almost like templates for how you can do how you can go through that process. So it's really nice, very helpful. There's a lot of worksheets. But I'm gonna share like the general gist of like the process, or like the mind shifts that need to happen so that you can start to manage or like address your perfectionism. So and again, it's a lot about changing how we think. So one of the cognitive distortions that happen with perfectionism is all or nothing thinking. All or nothing thinking. And literally, it's perfectionism, literally, diba? All or nothing. It's perfect or not. An example of this would be something like if you're like in a day, you plan out your day, you have like your to-do list, and maybe you're the type person that actually has a thing every hour or every 30 minutes. I used to be like that, like all the time in my calendar is filled with something I need to do. And so and all or nothing happens when, you know, despite everything, like despite achieving 80% or like 90% within the day, as long as you missed something, as long as one fell into the crack, as long as diba, hindi mo nagawa yung isang bagay, you already feel like that entire day was a failure. So that's all or nothing. It's either it's perfect or it's not. And yeah, like talagang it's distortion. No? Because right now, like, can you imagine how difficult that is? Because there's so many things that are beyond our control. And so if something happens, like, and then the 90% good that happened is no longer, you no longer um, count them. It's no longer, parang wala na siyang weight. Diba? Parang that's just so hard. But yeah, but for a while, I've had that, I've had that problem. Like, every day is not good because, something fell into the crack. Something, a schedule was missed, or a task was not ticked, and things like that. So changing all or nothing. So, and then another thing is, which is related to this one, is negative bias. So we are actually biased. I think, no, I was going to say, I think most people are, but that's me making assumptions again. So I'm not going to say it. But yeah, there's a tendency to be biased towards negative, wherein we only see like the negative things that are happening. Like, okay, you assess the day, how this day went. Like, oh, hindi ko nagawa yung ganito, or like this didn't happen, stop. And then that's it. And then you feel defeated again. You feel like a failure. And it's because if there's anything that you failed at objectively, but that is seeing the positive. So noticing the positives actually help with perfectionism. Because yun yung problem eh. You go deep into that cycle. The more negative that you see, the more things that you see are not perfect, are not good enough. But if you're able to acknowledge the positives, it really helps. And in a way, I think this is where like the gratitude exercise also comes in. Because with the gratitude exercise, you really try intentionally to find good things. Diba? to find good things in your life in general. But I guess to be more specific, like with your perfectionism, is that especially in the areas of your life where you find that it is manifesting, to actually seek for positive things, like for your progress, for for the progress. And this reminds me, I get a little bit distracted because this reminds me, like for a while I had this mantra which my coach reminded me a lot about, which is progress, not perfection. So it's a little bit more about the all or nothing. Yung parang feeling mo na as long as hindi mo pa na-achieve yung thing, you can't celebrate because you haven't succeeded yet. It's all or nothing. But yeah, it's a good reminder, progress, not perfection. As long as you're moving, however small that is, however like limited steps that is, that's something. You gotta celebrate. Celebrate your small wins. So ito naman yung positive. Look for the positive and celebrate it. Don't focus always just on the negative. And yeah, what else? Should. Okay, should. This is really powerful because I you would realize, and this is a good exercise. I think try to reflect on like what are the shoulds that you are telling yourself. I should be like this. I should do this. I should like that. Ganyan. Should. Nang should. And really reflect and really ask yourself, do you are they really shoulds? Are they really shoulds in your life? Or you were just conditioned to think they are shoulds? And you've conditioned yourself as well to think that they are shoulds in your life. They are not. So it's a very good exercise to reflect on that. And you may find that there's a lot of those. And and that um and that maybe they are not really shoulds. And you can also reprogram yourself, like the language that you use. So I used to use should a lot, no, but I've changed it. Like there's something that comes to me like, okay, I should do this. I should do this. And then I pause a little bit and then reflect. Okay, should I really do this? How important is this really is? And then there are many branches of questions like, should I really do this or is this something that someone can do? Diba? Should I really do this now or this can wait? And yeah, maybe that question can be, it can be tricky because it can lead to procrastinating or whatsoever. But it could be a very valid question. Should I really be doing this now or this can wait? And one question that I also ask myself is, do I want to do this? This is should, because I'm telling myself I should do this. Do I really want to do this? And I try to do more of the things that I want to do. And sometimes I don't like to do some things, but they are legit shoulds. Like you should eat, should sleep. But I guess the change there is that instead of just saying like the should, we try to reflect and really think, what is it for? So I'm telling myself I should sleep by now. It's almost morning. And it's not that I'm punishing myself that I should do it, but it's because I want to be healthy. And I want to wake up tomorrow feeling good. And I want to be able to be on time for my meeting tomorrow. So it just changes, just shift from the should into like I want to. So it makes it parang easier to accept. And like, parang yung body mo, kasi di ba related yan, di ba? At least for me, no? Parang I'm not too tight. I'm not too And again, I'm not too tight thinking about it. Whereas if it should, I should be on time in the meeting. I should be on time, diba? It's different when I want to be on time. I want to be on time because I respect other people's time, and I want to be able to finish it on time as well because there are other things that I actually want to do. So, diba? Like, even the energy changes. Eh? So, ayan. And what else? So there's labels. It's still related like to how we use words, how we communicate with ourselves. Like yung labels na okay, out of like the many things that you wanted to do in the day, you didn't do one, and then you start labeling yourself. Oh, I'm such a failure. Oh, I'm so lazy. Oh, I'm not disciplined enough. Oh, like you know, there's just a lot of labels that we're using on ourselves and generally even on others, diba? But yeah, so we have to be mindful with the labels. So what you can do as well is like see, try to reflect like what are the labels that you're using on yourself around around these things, and can you change them, or maybe you don't need them at all, diba? And like with labels as well, it's a little bit like related with overgeneralizing, diba? Like no, overgeneralize mo siya na, okay, this didn't work out, like this thing you didn't do, you have a label, I'm such a failure. You already overgeneralized na just because this one thing didn't get done, overgeneralized na failure, and you labeled yourself as a failure already, where you can just say that, okay, today I did I did 9 out of the 10 things I wanted to do. But by the way, 10 things, that's too much, no? Try 3. That's another change that I did. These are the 3 main things that I want to do. Other things that, yeah, would be nice to do, but if I don't get to do them, okay. So, but yeah, instead of saying like, I'm a failure today, you just say like, oh, I did just 2 out of 3 today. No judgment, no labels. Just, it is what it is, diba? And you see like the emotion that comes with it is different. So you don't feel like you need to punish yourself or whatever, because you didn't label it as something and you didn't overgeneralize that thing. Yeah. And I guess one more, probably the last. So again, there's a lot, but another one that I want to mention is catastrophizing. And this cognitive distortion isn't only with perfectionism. It's like with many other conditions. Catastrophizing is, yeah, from the word catastrophe. So it's like you feel like a catastrophe will happen, like the worst case scenario will happen just because something happened. So to illustrate lang yung example ko, like with emails, di ba? It's just an email, but I was catastrophizing in the sense like, okay, if I don't write this email well, maybe it will not send a good impression to this potential partner, like this person. And if this if that happens, then we will not be able to proceed into the next conversation, and that means we're gonna miss out on this opportunity. And if that happens now, oh no, then no. I don't want to give very specific examples, but that's how the mind works. It's like the world's gonna end just because of that silly thing. And when you're very deep in your cognitive distortion, it feels like it just makes sense. But yeah, you'll realize it doesn't. And here is where like 2 very I guess concrete suggestions I can give, which is first, seek help. It's really helpful kasi when you're deep in this thing, and I guess it's the same like with any other like mental health, ano, 'di ba? Problems, is that when you're deep in that, it's quite hard to actually see, to actually really parang maano mo siya, like mahimay mo, 'di ba? To really get into the details of it, to really understand it, to filter it out. It's hard. So for me, it was very helpful that there's another person pointing things out to me, telling me that, oh, okay, that's like a cognitive distortion. Okay, now you're okay, now it's like an all or nothing thinking. Okay, that right there is you're catastrophizing again and stuff like that. Just to remind us, because it's easy to miss. Diba? But yeah, it may happen that, we are not capable of, accessing these helps. One thing that we can do, which I also did, which was very helpful as well, is to journal, to write. Write your thoughts. It really helps because when you're deep in the thoughts, you're deep in it, diba? You're swimming in the thoughts. You don't know. It's like the saying that the fish. It's almost like the fish does not recognize the sea or like the water, something like that. But yeah, and whatever it is. But yeah, it's like it's hard to recognize because you're so deep into your thoughts. It's hard to see these thoughts that you would want to challenge. So having another person help you with that. But if that's not available, the journal can help you. While you are deep in it, you write it, write. And then find some time when you're feeling okay, you feel like you're in a good balance, diba? And then you check it, and then you see it with clear eyes, and you see like, oh, am I really telling myself this? Wow, diba? And then you see how your mind works, how your thoughts, what your thoughts are like, and then you can start challenging them. You can start like picking out like the things that, okay, this is not helpful, this is not compassionate, this is judgmental, diba? So ayun, those are the things. I think that might be enough for this episode. I hope that you got something. I know it's a lot, but yeah, I guess let's try to just recall that. So the main steps really is just deciding that you want to change, you want to address it, and then gather data to understand yourself, um, and to challenge your assumptions, and and the third is, as you are challenging those assumptions, to actually shift your mindset and change the way you think. And again, there are many ways that it manifests, and many ways that you could do it. But yeah, you basically, with the new data that you've gotten, you can challenge your assumptions, and now you can start thinking differently and acting differently, doing things differently. So, ayun siya. I think it's a cycle din naman, 'di ba? As you're learning more, you're experimenting, and then you're learning more, and then you're also understanding. Or there's so many tips, and then you try to apply one, and you experiment. I think at least for me this year, I'm trying to see life really as a big experiment, and just really trying to experiment on a lot of things, and not be so attached to specific outcomes or like specific results. Because yeah, I guess one thing that's a little bit related with perfectionism as well is like the need for control, diba? Like yun, like the need for control. But I guess the acknowledgement that a lot of things are beyond our control really helps as well. So I guess the gist, like the key takeaway from this would be that perfectionism becomes a problem because we associate our self worth so much on achieving these very high standards, rigid and sometimes unrealistic standards. And usually they are around achievements. And what we want to happen is to actually weaken this association. And instead of associating our self worth on our achievements or on the outputs of these things, that we associate our self worth more on more of the intrinsic values, or like the things that really really matter to us for for what they are. Alam mo yun? It's not like they are important because they bring us something else, but in itself they are important. It's different for everyone. So reflect on like what are the core values that things that you really really value, for just for what they are, diba? And also it helps to base our self-evaluation on as many domains as possible in life. So for example, some of us sometimes just like base our self-worth or self-evaluation on like work. Maybe that was my case before. Just everything was about the output or like the outcome at work. And like if it's not working well, then I'm not a good person. My self-worth is to the ground, etc. But if our self-worth is actually, or our self-evaluation is based on many domains of life, like you have professional life, then you have a social life, you have your family, maybe you have you also base your evaluation on relationships, on creativity, on play, on how much, on your health, diba? Then there's lower risk, diba, of being very rigid in a specific area of your life. And because, diba, the reality is, there's just so much that we can control, diba? Most of the things are beyond our control. And if you put it's almost like putting all your eggs in a basket, diba? By saying like my worth depends on the success of the success I have in my career. And it's like it's all or nothing, if it then doesn't work out, then diba? Parang yeah, you feel like a failure. Whereas, okay, you have your career, maybe it's not doing very well, but you have friends, you have your art, diba? You have your creativity, you have your music, whatever it is, you have your poem or whatever you're doing, you have your friends, you have other side projects that are not necessarily work, you have your health, diba? So there's so many other areas of your life where you could be actually doing really well. And it helps because, again, things happen. We don't control everything. We control very, very little. and and we need these other areas of our life to to keep us afloat. Because syempre it happens, diba? If something didn't work out, of course it hurts. Whether you're perfectionist or not, it hurts. But again, if you put all your eggs in that basket and all your self-worth in that, then it's just super high stakes. So yeah. And finally, I guess gist talaga, which is which is I am in that journey talaga. And that is self-compassion. Self-compassion. Because the thing with the thing with perfectionism, like the second critical component, diba? You're striving so hard to achieve these standards despite their impact in your life, despite the negative effects. Diba? It's because you're hard, you're being hard on yourself. You're unable to show yourself compassion, enough compassion. And it really is key. Um, if treating yourself as you would treat your best friend or someone you truly love, meaning that if they, yeah, just reflect on it, diba? Parang if lahat ng standards that you put on yourself, imagine that your best friend is in the same situation and is not hitting those targets. Like, how would you how would you deal with them? How would you treat them? And yeah, you would be surprised with how probably different you're treating yourself from them. Yeah, sometimes I it helps for me, like, to even imagine, like, you're wearing a hat, diba? So that there's an expression, diba, like wearing the hat of what. And I have this, like, the friend hat, and really really specifically and intentionally, like when I'm like feeling like that and like being hard on myself, and like, okay, I'm gonna wear the hat of the best friend, hat of the friend, and just be compassionate to myself. But what I would tell this best friend of mine, now that she is thinking all these things and going through all these things, what am I gonna tell her? And you'll find that you're actually able to tell yourself some really compassionate stuff. So yeah, self-compassion. It also includes yung some flexibility again with your shoulds or musts. Flexibility with, like, not taking things all or nothing. Diba? Everything is a spectrum. So ayan. So that's it. I hope you got something out of it. I probably just ramble again, but yeah. If anything, there's anything that you found useful, there's more in the book. There's worksheets and all, very very good guide questions. You'll find it very helpful. And if you have suggestions, you have stories you want to share, there's going to be places where you can do that on the website and also on our social media. So we have Facebook and probably we have Twitter. So you can comment those. We will be posting questions where you can share your story as well. You can make suggestions on, like, other tips you can share on how to address perfectionism. And yeah, I hope to hear from you and to learn more tips. This is a process. This is an ongoing process. So it's not like you've done the book and then okay, I'm good. So I still need more suggestions, I guess. Okay, and so to end this episode, as always, we end with a question. And so the question that I want to leave you for this episode is, how can you show yourself self-compassion today? Let me say that again. How can you show yourself self-compassion today? That's for this episode. And yeah, lots of love, to you, and hope that you join me again in the next episodes. And if you have ideas for other topics you want to hear from this podcast, feel free to let us know. And thank you, and hope you have a wonderful time.